A quick disclaimer before we begin. The PEMF podcast does not contain any medical advice, and the content provided is for informational purposes only. If you have any health concerns, please visit a healthcare professional. Welcome back to the PEMF podcast. Today we're going to be talking about PEMF and grounding, covering the main differences and any similarities across all areas, from technical benefits and products.
And we've gone much deeper than we did last time. Last time we tried to keep it super simple and void of kind of any confusion, but I think we actually went too far and maybe missed some actual key points while trying to keep it simple and understandable. But this time is going to be a lot more of a comprehensive review, and we're going to go a lot deeper in all the aspects, as Andy just said. But if this is someone's first time, let's just start off with what actually is PEMF.
Yeah, so for any newbies, PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Field Therapy. It's a non-invasive, a drug-free approach that uses pulsed electromagnetic fields to stimulate the body at a cellular level. Since the 50s, thousands of studies have explored its potential to support recovery, circulation, bone healing, pain management, and overall well-being. It's even received FDA approval for a range of applications, from healing non-bone fractures to treating depression and anxiety, and even part of treatment protocols for certain types of brain cancer. So in simple terms, PEMF helps create an environment in the body where the natural processes can function more effectively and ultimately heal.
Okay, great then. So on the other hand, what is grounding?
Yeah, so grounding, also known as earthing, is the practice of making direct contact with the Earth's surface, like walking barefoot on soil, grass, or sand. The Earth carries a natural negative charge, and the idea is that by connecting to it, the body can absorb electrons that may help balance its internal electrical state. There is research into grounding. It's a lot smaller and more limited than PEMF, but some studies suggest possible effects on inflammation, stress, circadian rhythm, and sleep. There's many people that also describe it as more simply a way of feeling calmer, rebalanced, and more connected to nature.
Okay, great. I think a great place to start with this would literally just be to compare the two, because it's a really common question we get. So kind of what are the key differences?
Yeah, so last time we explained that the difference as them almost being the same with PEMF, replicating the Earth's natural magnetic field, but just having a larger intensity of field and the broader frequency range, rather than being stuck to one frequency. While that isn't completely wrong, there's more to it, and I think it's worth breaking it down properly here. So to clear up any confusion straight away, PEMF isn't literally replicating the Earth's natural magnetic field directly. The Earth's field is static and constant, and it doesn't pulse or change like PEMFs do. And it doesn't have a frequency as such. What people often confuse this with is the Schumann resonance. That's a natural electromagnetic frequency in the Earth's atmosphere, usually around 7.8 Hertz. It's sometimes called the Earth's heartbeat. Grounding itself isn't a frequency at all. It's about absorbing electrons directly from the Earth when your skin makes contact with the soil, grass, or sand. So when people say grounding connects you to the Earth's frequency, it's really more of a metaphor than a mechanism. So to clear it up, any confusion, in that area straight away, PEMF isn't literally replicating the Earth's magnetic field. Once again, the reason we explained it that way before is because everyone knows what the Earth's magnetic field is, so it's a useful comparison point to get people into the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. I know I've explained it to people before, and when you say magnetic field, sometimes they might be a little bit confused, but then you say like Earth and it clicks straight away, and then kind of it's the easy entry point, as you say. But now we've kind of gone over the main technical differences with the field kind of itself. What about how the difference in how the body actually takes in these fields or absorbs them?
Yeah, so grounding or earthing is all about direct contact with the Earth's surface. When you're barefoot on soil, grass, or sand, your body can absorb electrons from the ground via the mechanism of electron transfer. PEMF, on the other hand, works in a completely different way. Instead of relying on electrons from the ground, PEMF uses pulsed electromagnetic fields to actively interact with the body. This is where Faraday's law of induction comes in. Faraday's law explains that when a magnetic field changes over time, it generates an electrical current in a nearby conductive materials. In PEMF therapy, your body is that conductor. As the coil in the device pulses, it induces tiny electrical currents inside the tissues in the cells. These microcurrents can influence how cells function and communicate, supporting natural processes like circulation and repair.
Okay, great. So in summary, grounding uses electron transfer to get into the body, and PEMF uses Faraday's law of induction. But now kind of moving on to the benefits. A lot of people say the benefits are one for one, you get exactly the same, but is that entirely true?
No, and that's the common misconception. While both grounding and PEMF are often linked to similar areas, such as things like stress, sleep, recovery, and inflammation, but the science behind them is very, very different. Grounding research is still fairly limited, with only around 20 scientific studies. The studies suggesting grounding may influence factors such as inflammation, cortisol levels, and even circadian rhythm. However, the evidence is still really limited and not yet widely replicated. So, while a lot of people are reporting feeling calmer and more balanced after spending time barefoot outdoors, which could partly be physiological, partly psychological, or even a mixture of both, PEMF, on the other hand, has thousands and thousands of clinical linked studies over a few decades, with thousands of papers and multiple FDA approvals. It's been cleared for non-union brain fractures, post-operative pain, swelling, depression, anxiety, and even part of brain cancer treatment now. So we've mentioned this before. That doesn't mean every frequency or device is approved for every condition, but it does show that PEMF has a much stronger evidence base than grounding. So while grounding is free, natural, and shows really promising early data, it's not equivalent to PEMF or PEMF devices, which are measurable, targeted, and clinically evaluated in ways that grounding just simply isn't yet. You could think of grounding as a gentle nudge, whereas PEMF is more like a precise dial that you can turn up, turn down, depending on what the individual needs.
Yeah, so there are loads of areas where PEMF and grounding do kind of overlap in the benefits, but there are also areas where PEMF might shine higher. For example, in pain management, there isn't many kind of even anecdotal reports of people saying that they've experienced better pain or less pain from grounding as opposed to PEMF, especially with the high intensities where people stand up straight away and they've got that instant kind of pain blocking effect. But I think what would be valuable here is to actually compare the mechanisms of how kind of PEMF and grounding each achieve their results.
Okay, let's start with inflammation, because that's probably one of the most common reasons why someone would use either PEMF or grounding as a wellness tool to address inflammation. So when we look at the different mechanisms of how grounding may reduce inflammation, these are mostly theoretical and based on small studies. Researchers are proposing that contact with the earth could allow electrons to enter the body, helping to reduce oxidative stress, improve circulation, and normalize cortisol rhythms, all of which are linked to inflammation. So in other words, grounding isn't thought to have a direct anti-inflammatory effect, but rather an indirect influence through these related pathways. So comparing this to PEMF, the mechanisms of how PEMF may reduce inflammation are very well documented across many studies. Research has shown that PEMFs act on A2A adenosine receptors, which are known to regulate inflammation and even provide neuroprotection in the brain following an injury. So by modulating these receptors, PEMFs can suppress the activation of NF-κB, which is a key inflammatory pathway, and reduce the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. This is especially relevant in chronic conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, inflammatory bowel disease, and asthma, where cytokines drive ongoing tissue damage and symptoms. So, in summary, PEMF is a more direct effect on inflammation compared to grounding.
That's a great breakdown, and it's not that we're trying to say that grounding is less effective than PEMF or PEMF is less effective than grounding, that they just have different mechanisms in how they work, and one has slightly more research than the other one pretty much in exploring those mechanisms at the current moment. But we get a lot of questions about product comparisons, especially when it comes to obviously PEMF mats versus grounding mats. So what actually is a grounding mat? Let's clear that up first.
Yeah, sure. So grounding devices like bed sheets or mats are essentially conductors. They're designed to connect your body to the Earth's natural electrical charge. That usually means they're wired to a grounding rod in the soil outside your home. But however, some versions plug into the actual grounding port of the wall socket. So this can raise questions about dirty electricity and whether you're really connecting to the earth or just the building's wiring. Either way, the device itself isn't creating a field. It's just acting as a bridge from you so you can absorb the electrons from the earth.
Okay, great then. So comparing this to a PEMF device.
Yeah, so a PEMF mat, in contrast, is an active device. It doesn't rely on the earth at all. It has copper coils that when you put an electrical charge through, they generate pulsed electromagnetic fields through either battery form or plugging them into the wall. Once again, the mains power devices, there can be questions around dirty electricity, but a high quality PEMF device will remove any of that risk. However, we have tested some of the low quality ones and have seen it. So you really need to do your research when you pick the right PEMF device. But these devices can be in like yoga mat form or small devices in comparison to grounding where they're always like a larger mat or a bed sheet. PEMF devices, unlike grounding, have adjustable parameters such as frequencies and intensity settings. So in conclusion, the biggest difference is this. A grounding sheet is passive, it connects you to the earth, but it doesn't generate anything itself. A PEMF mat is active. It produces fields that actively stimulate your body through different frequencies and intensities.
Okay, great. So we know how they differ technically now, but how do they differ in cost?
Yes, there is a big difference here. Grounding products are relatively cheap. They're a basic mat or sheet, might cost anywhere from £50 to £200 depending on the size and quality. PEMF mats on the other hand range from several £100s to tens and thousands of pounds due to the copper and the build.
That is quite a big difference. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest reason is that there's a lot that goes into PEMF mat or a device. It's not just pieces of fabric with conductive threads like a grounding sheet. A PEMF system contains copper coils, a control unit, and often complex software to deliver adjustable frequencies and intensities. All of that requires careful engineering, high quality materials, and rigorous testing. To give you an idea, when I first looked into creating my own PEMF device, my goal was to make it for under £100. But after the very first meeting with engineers, it became very obvious that that wasn't even going to be remotely possible. The cost of the components alone was far higher than that, even, never mind the manufacturing, safety checks, the compliance, everything that came on top of that. That's why PEMF mats sit in a completely different price bracket. With grounding mats, you're paying for a simple conductor, and with PEMF, you're paying for a piece of active technology that can generate fields, adjust settings, and a lot more.
Yeah, so at the end of the day, they pretty much are just more expensive to make, really. But another common question we get is, can you use a PEMF mat as a grounding mat or a grounding mat as a PEMF mat? Is that something that you can do?
Yes, we addressed this in the last episode and we got it a little bit wrong there. The answer is no, not at all. They're completely different tools and one can't really be replaced the other. A grounding mat doesn't generate anything. It simply acts as a conductor, letting electrons flow from the earth into your body. If it's connected properly, there's no pulsing field, no frequency and no intensity to adjust. So it can't mimic what a PEMF device does. PEMF mat, on the other hand, creates pulsed electromagnetic fields using coils, a control unit. It doesn't connect you to the earth. It generates its own fields. So while you could technically set a PEMF device to run at like 7.83 Hertz to match the Schumann resonance, that's not the same thing as grounding. PEMF isn't delivering electrons. It's inducing tiny electrical currents into the tissues. So they're similar in the sense, but both interact with the body's electrical nature. But the mechanism is very different. You can't swap one for the other and expect the same results. If you want subtle electron transfer, that's grounding. If you want adjustable pulsed electromagnetic fields, then that's PEMF.
And another common product question we probably get every week is, can they both be used together at the same time?
Yeah, of course you can use them together. And essentially, they are completely different mechanisms. So there's no conflict between them. As we've said a few times now, grounding is about absorbing electrons from the earth. So PEMF is different modality in how it works. It's about pulsed electromagnetic fields creating microcurrents in the body. Those processes don't cancel each other out as well. If anything, they can complement one another. So we would personally say that if you're using PEMF, there isn't much need to ground as well. But the answer is yes, PEMF and grounding can be used together. It's not an either or choice. It's more about what fits your lifestyle and what setup feels right for you, really.
Yeah, and so kind of to wrap this episode up, before kind of we go through the main takeaways on what the differences are, let's quickly do some myth busting on some of the PEMF and grounding myths. So what are some of these?
Yeah, cool. Let's wrap this up and try and go through some of these myths. So firstly, PEMF isn't just replicating the Earth's natural magnetic field. The Earth's field is static and constant, whereas PEMF is pulsed and changing. That's what creates measurable effects in the body. Second, grounding doesn't actually connect you to a frequency. The Schumann resonance is a natural atmospheric frequency at about 7.83 Hertz. But grounding itself is really about electron transfer, not tuning into a frequency. And finally, earthing and grounding get used interchangeably, but technically, earthing is the wellness practice of connecting your body to the earth, while grounding is used more in engineering. It's about electrical systems. We'll keep calling it grounding here though, because that's the term that most people use.
And yeah, exactly. Grounding is just the more common term. That is why we've probably titled this episode PEMF versus grounding and have referenced it as grounding throughout the episode. But let's go into the kind of final takeaway. What is the difference, or what is the takeaway you want people to leave with about PEMF and grounding?
Yeah, so we've covered what PEMF and grounding actually are and how they interact with the body in completely different ways, and why PEMF isn't just replicating the Earth's natural magnetic field. Grounding is all about electron transfer, whereas PEMF is about pulsed electromagnetic fields that create microcurrents inside your tissues, which can actually adjust by frequency, intensity, and duration. Then in terms of use cases, grounding is great as a free lifestyle practice like walking barefoot outside, spending time in nature, or even sleeping on a grounding sheet if you want to bring that connection indoors. It can help people feel calmer, more balanced. But on the other side, PEMF just goes that bit further. It's been studied for decades with thousands of papers and FDA approvals for things like non-union brain fractures, depression, anxiety, and even part of brain cancer treatment protocols, as we mentioned, but also super effective at treating pain. Beyond that clinical side, PEMF is also used for everyday wellness, brainwave entrainment, for relaxation, for sleep, circulation, recovery after training, and reducing inflammation. So in short, grounding is subtle and natural. PEMF is precise and proven. They're not the same, but they can complement each other. If you want to feel connected to nature, go barefoot on the earth. If you want structured, targeted stimulation from the comfort of your own home as well, use PEMF. And it's, for many people, the best approach is actually to do both.
Yeah, for sure. And if you're new to PEMF, I recommend going back and listening to some of our older episodes, either with guests or about certain conditions. And if there's any conditions that are missing that you'd like us to cover, just make sure to leave them down in the comments below, as well as any guests you'd like us to have on. And while you're down there, make sure to like, subscribe, leave us a 5-star rating on whatever audio platform you're on. It just helps us make more and more of these episodes in the future.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the PEMF podcast.